Snow fell steadily over Atlanta, each flake settling like a quiet accusation against the cracked windows of the abandoned laundromat where Ethan Carter, 22, huddled with his 3-month-old daughter, Emma. The white American widower, pale skin chapped by the biting January wind, pressed Emma closer to his chest, her tiny body trembling beneath a worn green blanket that had once belonged to his wife, Claire. The blanket, frayed at the edges from months of constant use, carried the faint scent of Claire's lavender lotion, a cruel reminder of the life Ethan had lost. At 22, he looked older, his blue eyes shadowed by grief and hunger, his sandy hair matted under a thrift store beanie. Emma's soft whimpers cut through the silence, each cry a stab to Ethan's heart, urging him toward a choice he'd never imagined making. 3 months ago, Claire had died in childbirth, leaving Ethan with a daughter he adored and a world that felt impossibly heavy. His savings, meager from his job as a warehouse clerk, had vanished on medical bills and formula. Now, with 47 cents jangling in the pocket of his threadbare jeans, Ethan faced the truth. Good intentions couldn't fill Emma's empty stomach. The laundromat, its rusted machines looming like ghosts, offered no warmth, only shelter from the snow piling outside. Ethan's breath fogged in the chilly air as he rocked Emma, her tiny hands clutching the blanket's edge, her dark eyes, Claire's eyes, staring up with a trust that broke him. "Shh, princess," he whispered, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Daddy's got you." But the words felt hollow, a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Across the street, the CVS pharmacy glowed like a beacon, its red letters cutting through the snowy haze. Inside were rows of baby formula, which Claire had insisted on. Organic, expensive, the best for their girl. Ethan had paced past the store for hours, counting 17 loops in the snow, each step bringing him closer to a decision that twisted his gut. Stealing wasn't who he was. He'd grown up in a small Georgia town, raised by a single mother who taught him right from wrong. But Claire's last words, gasped in the hospital as her strength faded, echoed in his mind. "Do whatever it takes for our girl, Ethan. Promise me." He'd kissed her forehead, swearing he would, never imagining whatever it takes might mean crossing a line he couldn't uncross. Emma's cries grew sharper, her small face scrunching with hunger. Ethan adjusted the blanket, feeling her tiny ribs through her onesie, her weight lighter than it should be at 3 months. He'd skipped meals for days, rationing their last can of formula to stretch it, but now it was gone. The 47 cents in his pocket mocked him, enough for a candy bar, not a $30 can of formula. The wind howled outside, rattling the laundromat's loose panes, and Ethan's hands shook, not just from the cold, but from the weight of what he was about to do. He thought of Claire, her warm laugh, the way she'd trace circles on his hand during late-night talks when they couldn't afford much else. She'd believed in him, called him her steady heart, but that heart was faltering now, crumbling under the pressure of single fatherhood. Ethan stood, his legs unsteady from hunger and lack of sleep, and bundled Emma tighter against his chest. Her cries softened to whimpers, as if she sensed the moment's gravity. The CVS doors were just across the street, automatic and inviting, promising solutions to problems money could solve. Ethan had watched the store's rhythm, the gray-haired security guard distracted by his phone, the cashier busy with late-night customers buying energy drinks and cigarettes. Grabbing the formula, slipping it under his jacket, and walking out would be simple. No one would notice a desperate father in the chaos of a 24-hour pharmacy. But the risk loomed large: arrest, losing Emma, failing Claire's promise. Yet doing nothing meant watching his daughter starve, and that was a failure he couldn't bear. He stepped into the snow, the cold biting through his worn sneakers. Emma's warmth against him, the only thing keeping him grounded. The street was quiet, Atlanta's nightlife muted by the storm. As he approached the CVS, the automatic doors loomed like a threshold between the man he was and the one he might become. Ethan's heart pounded, his pale fingers tightening around Emma's blanket. This wasn't just about formula. It was about survival, about proving he could be the father Emma deserved, even if it meant breaking every rule he'd ever lived by. The doors were steps away, and with each one, Ethan felt Claire's promise pulling him into the unknown. The CVS doors slid open with a soft whoosh, enveloping Ethan Carter and his 3-month-old daughter Emma in a rush of artificial warmth and the sharp scent of antiseptic. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting stark shadows across the baby aisle where Ethan stood, his heart hammering as his fingers grazed a can of premium formula. Organic, the kind Claire had always insisted on for Emma. His hands trembled, not just from the cold that clung to his worn jacket, but from the weight of what he was about to do. Stealing was a line he'd never crossed, but Emma's hungry cries, muffled against the green blanket bundled around her, drowned out his conscience. The security guard near the entrance scrolled on his phone, oblivious, and the cashier was swamped with a line of late-night customers. It would be quick. Slip the can under his jacket and walk out. No one would notice. But before he could act, a voice cut through the hum of the store, smooth and steady, like a lifeline thrown into his storm. "Excuse me, you don't have to do that." Ethan froze, his hands still on the formula, and turned slowly, expecting a store manager, or worse, the guard. Instead, he faced a woman belonging to a different world. Vivian Harris stood in the aisle, her tailored coat open to reveal a crisp blazer, her natural hair styled in loose curls that framed a face both commanding and kind. Her dark eyes, sharp with intelligence, softened as they met Ethan's, lingering briefly on Emma's tiny form nestled against his chest. She said, "I know what desperation looks like," her voice low but firm, "and you're not a thief." Ethan's throat tightened, shame and relief warring within him. He opened his mouth to protest, but Emma's soft whimper stopped him, her small fingers clutching the blanket's edge as if urging him to listen. "I'm Vivian," she continued, stepping closer, her heels clicking softly on the linoleum. "You're Claire's husband, aren't you?" "Ethan?" The use of his name hit like a jolt, and he nodded, too stunned to speak. "Claire cleaned my office at Pinnacle Tech," Vivian explained, her gaze flickering to Emma, who stirred, her dark eyes blinking up at the stranger. "She showed me pictures of you both and talked about how excited you were for your baby. I'm so sorry about her loss." The sincerity in her tone cracked something in Ethan, a wall he'd built to hold back grief. He clutched Emma tighter, her warmth grounding him as memories of Claire, her laugh, her gentle touch, threatened to spill over. Ethan admitted, "I can't afford this," his voice rough, gesturing to the formula. "I've got 47 cents, and she's hungry." Vivian's eyes softened further, but there was no pity, only understanding. She reached for the formula can, her fingers brushing his briefly, a contact that felt oddly steadying. "Let me," she said, not as a question, but a quiet command. Before Ethan could argue, she walked toward the register, the formula in hand, her stride purposeful. Ethan followed, pride stinging, but desperation winning, Emma's quiet coos urging him forward. At the counter, Vivian added a bottle and a pack of diapers, paying without hesitation. The cashier, a tired woman with a name tag reading Rosa, glanced at Ethan curiously, but said nothing. Outside, the snow still fell, dusting Vivian's coat as she turned to him. She said, "You can't stay in that laundromat," her breath visible in the cold. "Come with me, just for tonight." Ethan hesitated, his instinct to refuse charity clashing with Emma's needs. Vivian seemed to sense it. "It's not charity," she said, her voice softer now. "It's what Claire would have wanted for her daughter." The mention of Claire broke his resistance. He nodded, following Vivian to her sleek Mercedes-Benz, its heated seats contrasting with the icy laundromat. As they drove, Emma settled against Ethan, her tiny hand grasping his finger, her trust a silent plea to accept help. Vivian spoke in the quiet hum of the car, her voice steady, but laced with something more profound. "I lost my son, Michael, 15 years ago. Leukemia. He was 2. She kept her eyes on the road, but Ethan caught the slight tightening of her jaw. "I built Pinnacle Tech from nothing and fought my way up in a world that didn't always want a black woman at the top. But losing Michael, it broke something work couldn't fix." Ethan listened, the weight of her words settling beside his grief. "Claire used to talk about you," Vivian added, glancing at him. "She said you had a heart to carry the world for your family. Let me help you take it now." They pulled into a gated Buckhead community, the houses grand and pristine even under snow. Vivian's modern colonial home loomed at the end of a curved drive, its warm windows glowing like a promise. Inside, she led Ethan to a guest room, where a white crib stood in the corner, adorned with a mobile of stars and a faded stuffed lion, relics of Michael's nursery. Emma stirred as Ethan laid her down, her tiny fingers brushing the lion, her coos softening the room's stillness. Vivian watched, her expression a mix of pain and longing. "She's beautiful," she said, her voice catching like her mother's. Ethan nodded, his throat too tight to speak, sensing that this moment, this act of kindness, was as much for Vivian as it was for him and Emma. As Vivian left to fetch towels, Ethan stood by the crib, watching Emma's chest rise and fall. The room was warm, the silence heavy with possibility. He didn't know Vivian Harris, but her compassion had stopped him from crossing a line that might have cost him everything. Outside, Atlanta slept under its snowy blanket. But inside, in the glow of a stranger's kindness, Ethan felt the first flicker of hope since Claire's death, a hope that scared him as much as it saved him. Vivian Harris's Buckhead mansion was a world apart from the abandoned laundromat where Ethan Carter had spent the last weeks with his 3-month-old daughter, Emma. The polished hardwood floors gleamed under soft, recessed lighting, and modern art adorned the walls, each piece a testament to a life built on ambition and success. Ethan stood in the guest room, clutching Emma, whose tiny fingers curled around the frayed edge of Claire's green blanket. The room was a study in quiet luxury, neutral grays, plush linens, and a white crib in the corner, its star-shaped mobile still, as if frozen in time. A faded stuffed lion rested against the crib's rails, a relic of Vivian's son, Michael, lost to leukemia 15 years ago. Ethan's chest tightened as he laid Emma in the crib, her dark eyes blinking up at him, trusting and unaware of the disparity between this haven and their recent reality. Vivian appeared in the doorway, no longer in her tailored coat, but in jeans and a cream sweater, her curls loose around her shoulders. The change softened her, revealing a warmth that contrasted with the CEO Ethan had met in the CVS aisle hours earlier. She said, "This monitor connects to my room and the kitchen," setting a sleek device on the nightstand, her fingers moving with practiced ease. "If Emma needs a bottle at night, you'll find formula prepped downstairs." Her voice was steady, but her gaze lingered on Emma, who cooed softly, kicking her legs against the crib's soft mattress. Ethan caught the flicker of pain in Vivian's eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the nursery's history. "You kept this ready?" he asked, nodding toward the crib. Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line. "I couldn't let it go. Michael. He loved that lion." They moved to the kitchen, a granite and stainless steel masterpiece, where Vivian poured coffee from a machine that looked more complex than Ethan's old car. Emma slept upstairs, and the monitor's soft hum reminded her of her presence. As they sat on the island, Vivian's hands wrapped around her mug, Ethan sensed an opportunity to understand the woman who'd saved him from stealing. "You said you built Pinnacle Tech," he prompted, his voice low, careful not to break their fragile trust. Vivian nodded, her eyes distant. "I started as a coder, straight out of Spelman. The tech world wasn't kind to women like me, still isn't. I faced boardrooms full of men who questioned my every move, clients who assumed I was the assistant, not the boss. But I kept going, built Pinnacle from a startup to a leader in software solutions. It cost me friendships and my marriage. Michael was my anchor, until he wasn't." Her voice wavered, and Ethan felt a pang of recognition. "Claire was my anchor," he admitted, staring into his coffee. "She worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices, waitressing, and doing anything to keep us afloat while I was at the warehouse. She was so excited about Emma, saying she'd be our little fighter." He paused, the memory of Claire's hospital bed sharp and cutting. "I'm failing her, Vivian. I couldn't even feed Emma tonight." Vivian reached across the island, her hand resting near his, not touching, but close enough to offer comfort. "You're not failing her. You're here, fighting for her. That's what Claire wanted." Emma's soft babble came through the monitor, a high-pitched sound that made Ethan smile despite himself. "She's always been noisy," he said, a hint of pride breaking through. "Even in the hospital, she'd make these little squeaks, like she was announcing herself to the world." Vivian's lips curved, her eyes softening as she listened to the monitor. "Michael was like that," she said, "constantly chattering, even when he was too sick to move. I used to record him, to keep his voice." She stood, moving to a drawer and pulling out a small photo. A toddler with bright eyes, clutching the same stuffed lion now in Emma's crib. "This was him," she said, handing it to Ethan. The photo was a glimpse into Vivian's loss, and Ethan held it carefully, as if it might crumble. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. Vivian shook her head. "Don't be. Helping you, helping Emma. It's not about replacing him. It's about remembering I can still care." Her honesty disarmed Ethan, stirring something he hadn't felt since Claire, a connection born of shared wounds. He thought of the laundromat, the cold seeping into his bones, and now this warm kitchen, where Emma slept safely upstairs. "Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You could have walked away." Vivian leaned against the counter, her gaze steady. "Because I saw Claire in you, her strength, her love for Emma, and because I know what it's like to feel alone, to think you've got no one left to lean on. I had to fight for everything after Michael, and I see you fighting too." Emma's coos grew louder through the monitor, a playful sound that broke the tension. Vivian smiled, a real one that reached her eyes. "She's got her mother's spirit," she said. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "She does." As Vivian showed him where to find extra blankets, Ethan watched her move with a quiet grace, her strength tempered by vulnerability. The mansion's opulence, marble counters, soaring ceilings, made him feel small, a reminder of the gap between their worlds. Yet Emma's presence, her soft sounds filling the silence, grounded him. She'd taken to the crib instantly, her tiny fingers brushing the lion as if claiming it. Vivian's kindness wasn't just for him, but for Emma, a child who'd already lost so much. As they said goodnight, Ethan lingered by the crib, watching Emma sleep, her chest rising steadily. Outside, snow continued to fall, but in this temporary haven, Ethan felt the stirrings of something new, Not just safety, but the possibility of a bond that could change everything. The clock on Vivian Harris's kitchen counter glowed 2:47 a.m., its soft light cutting through the darkness of her Buckhead mansion. Ethan Carter jolted awake in the guest room, his body attuned to the sharp cries of his 3-month-old daughter, Emma, echoing through the baby monitor. The sheets, too soft compared to the rough blankets of the laundromat he'd called home, disoriented him momentarily. Then memory flooded back. Vivian's kindness at the CVS, the warm crib where Emma now slept, the stuffed lion from a lost child watching over her. Ethan stumbled to the crib, his bare feet silent on the plush carpet, and lifted Emma, her tiny body warm and restless against his chest. Her cries softened to whimpers as he swayed, whispering, "Shh, princess, let's get you fed." The house felt vast at night, its high ceilings and shadowed corners amplifying the weight of their temporary refuge. Ethan navigated the stairs, Emma's small hands clutching his shirt, her dark eyes glinting in the moonlight filtering through tall windows. With its granite island and gleaming appliances, the kitchen was a far cry from the laundromat's damp chill. Vivian had left formula supplies neatly arranged, bottles, cans, a warmer, organized with a precision that spoke of her CEO discipline. Ethan fumbled with a bottle, testing the temperature against his wrist, his movements clumsy from exhaustion. Emma's cries grew insistent, her tiny legs kicking, reminding her how often he'd stretched their last can of formula to make it last. As he adjusted the bottle, footsteps sounded on the stairs, light but deliberate. "Is she okay?" Vivian's voice carried a mix of concern and something softer, an eagerness that made Ethan look up. She stood at the kitchen's edge, her silk robe catching the under-cabinet lights like liquid silver. Her hair, free from its usual curls, framed her face, revealing faint lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and buried sorrows. She looked more vulnerable without makeup, less like the commanding woman who'd stopped him from stealing. "Just hungry," Ethan said, his voice rough. "Sorry, we woke you." Vivian shook her head, stepping closer, her bare feet silent on the tile. "I don't sleep much anymore. Haven't for years." She reached for Emma without asking, and Ethan, surprised by his instinct, handed her over. The transfer was seamless, as if they'd done it countless times. Emma, usually fussy with strangers, settled into Vivian's arms, her cries easing as Vivian guided the bottle to her lips. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching Emma's tiny hand reach for Vivian's necklace, a simple silver chain glinting in the low light. "She likes you," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. Vivian's lips curved into a smile, her eyes softening as Emma cooed, her fingers tugging playfully at the chain. "She's easy to love," Vivian replied, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to break the moment. The kitchen was quiet, save for Emma's contented sucking and the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan studied Vivian's profile, noting the gentle way she cradled Emma, her movements sure but tender, a muscle memory of motherhood that hadn't faded. "He said you're good at this," the words slipping out before he could stop them. Vivian's gaze flickered to him, then back to Emma. "I was a mother once," she said. "Your body doesn't forget, even when your heart tries." She paused, adjusting the bottle, and added, "Michael loved being held like this. He'd grab my earrings, always trying to figure out how they worked." Her smile was bittersweet, and Ethan felt a pull to know more, to understand the woman who'd opened her home to them. "Tell me about him," Ethan said, his voice soft, inviting. Vivian's hand stilled on the bottle momentarily, her eyes distant. "Michael was fearless," she said, "constantly climbing, always asking questions. Why the sky was blue, why birds didn't fall. He had this laugh, so big it filled every room. Even when he got sick, he'd giggle through the hospital visits." Her voice thickened, but she pressed on. I built Pinnacle Tech while he was in treatment, thinking that if I worked hard enough, I could control anything. But you can't prevent cancer. She looked at Emma, who was drifting to sleep, her tiny lips still on the bottle. She reminds me of him, not in looks, but in that spark. She's got fight in her, like Claire. Ethan's throat tightened at Claire's name, but the pain was less sharp than it had been. Emma's always been like that, he said. In the hospital, when we lost her, Emma kept making these little noises, like she was telling me to keep going. He paused, watching Emma's hand relax against Vivian's necklace. I don't know how to do this without her, but seeing Emma with you feels like she's telling me it's okay to accept help. Vivian met his eyes, her gaze steady but vulnerable. You're not alone, Ethan. Not tonight. Their hands brushed as Vivian shifted Emma, the contact sending a jolt through Ethan, unexpected and electric. He stepped back, suddenly aware of the moment's intimacy. The quiet kitchen, the sleeping baby, the woman who'd seen him at his lowest and hadn't looked away. Vivian handed Emma back, their fingers tangling briefly in the transfer. Sweet dreams, little one, she whispered, her voice soft as she adjusted the blanket. To Ethan, she added, there's a warmer in the kitchen if you need another bottle. My room's down the hall if you need anything. Her eyes held his for a moment, heavy with unspoken possibilities, before she turned and disappeared upstairs. Ethan stood alone, holding Emma, her warmth anchoring him. The mansion's silence felt alive, charged with the weight of what had just passed between them. Emma's soft breathing steadied him, and her trust in him and Vivian was a bridge across their grief. Outside, the snow fell silently over Atlanta, but inside, in the glow of a stranger's compassion, Ethan felt a spark of something he hadn't dared to hope for, a connection that could light the way forward, if only he were brave enough to follow it. 3 weeks into staying at Vivian Harris's Buckhead mansion, Ethan Carter felt like a guest in a life that wasn't his. The polished floors, the sleek appliances, and the guest room where his 3-month-old daughter, Emma, slept in a crib meant for another child, underscored the chasm between his reality and Vivian's. He stood in the kitchen, rinsing Emma's bottle, her soft coos from the living room high chair filling the morning with a warmth he hadn't known since Claire's death. Yet, as he watched Vivian move through her home, her phone buzzing with Pinnacle Tech emails, Ethan's chest tightened with a familiar ache, the fear that he was a burden, a man who couldn't provide for his daughter. Vivian had built her empire from nothing, navigating a tech industry that often dismissed her. She'd shared stories over late-night coffee, boardroom battles, clients who underestimated her, the toll of balancing motherhood with ambition until Michael's illness consumed everything. Her success was hard-won, and each piece of furniture in her mansion was a testament to her resilience. Ethan, meanwhile, had nothing to offer but gratitude and a daughter who needed more than he could give. Emma's giggle broke his thoughts as she batted at a rattle, her dark eyes bright with curiosity. Vivian glanced over from the counter, where she was prepping her morning smoothie, and smiled. "She's got spirit," she said, her voice warm like her mother's. Ethan nodded, but the words stung. Claire had been his strength. Without her, he felt like a shadow of the man she'd loved. Determined to reclaim his independence, Ethan had secured a job interview at Harper Construction, a small firm offering steady wages, not enough for luxury, but enough for a modest apartment and dignity. He dressed in his old suit, the jacket tight from months of wear, and kissed Emma's forehead before leaving her with Vivian, who'd insisted on watching her. "You've got this," Vivian said, her hand brushing his arm, a gesture that sent a jolt through him. At the interview, Ethan sat across from a manager whose skeptical gaze dissected his resume. A 3-month gap, no recent references, a life derailed by grief. Living in Buckhead now? The manager asked, eyebrow raised. With a friend, Ethan mumbled, feeling inadequate for what Vivian was becoming. The manager's smile was thin. We'll call you. Ethan knew they wouldn't. He returned to Vivian's mansion in the October heat, his shirt clinging to his back, his pride in tatters. The security guard at the gated community gave him a knowing look, as if Ethan were an imposter in this world of manicured lawns and luxury cars. Inside, Vivian was in her home office, her voice carrying through the glass doors as she negotiated a contract with the confidence of someone who'd never known failure. Emma sat in her high chair, smearing mashed banana on the tray, her laughter contrasting Ethan's churning thoughts. He stood in the living room, watching Vivian's silhouette, and felt the weight of his inadequacy settle like a stone. What was he doing here, playing house in a world he couldn't afford? Vivian emerged, her blazer swapped for a sweater, and noticed his expression. How'd it go? She asked, her tone gentle but probing. Ethan forced a smile, setting Emma's rattle on the counter. Great. They said they'd call. Vivian's eyes narrowed, seeing through the lie. You didn't get it, she said. Not a question. The kindness in her voice broke something in Ethan, and the words spilled out before he could stop them. This isn't working, Vivian. I'm living off you, eating your food, and sleeping in your house. Emma deserves a father who can provide, not a charity case. His voice cracked, and Emma, sensing the tension, looked up, her tiny hands stilling. Vivian's face tightened, but she stepped closer, her gaze fierce. You think this is charity? Ethan, I see a man fighting for his daughter, who walked into a pharmacy ready to risk everything for her. That's not a handout. That's strength. She gestured to Emma, who babbled softly, reaching for Vivian's hand. Look at her. She's happy and safe because you let me help. That's partnership, not pity. Ethan shook his head, his frustration boiling over. Partnership? You're paying for everything. Formula, diapers, this roof. What am I bringing to this? A baby who needs you more than I do? The words hit Vivian like a slap, and her eyes flashed hurt. Do you think I'm doing this for myself? To fill some void? She paused, her voice softening. Maybe at first, I saw Michael in Emma's smile, and I heard his laugh in her coos. But this isn't about replacing him. It's about us. About building something real. Emma reached out, her tiny fingers wrapping around Vivian's, and the sight stopped Ethan cold. His daughter, so trusting, was binding them together in ways he hadn't expected. I don't know how to be your equal, he admitted, his voice low. Not when you've got all this, and I've got nothing. Vivian moved closer, her hand still clasped by Emma's. You have everything, Ethan. You have her. You have a heart that keeps going, even after losing Claire. That's more than money can buy. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with vulnerability. I've built Pinnacle, faced down men who wanted me to fail, but I've been alone for 15 years. You and Emma remind me that I don't have to be. Ethan looked at Emma, her giggle returning as she waved her rattle, and felt his defenses crack. Vivian wasn't saving him out of pity. She was choosing him, choosing them, just as he was beginning to choose her. He took a step toward her, the distance between them shrinking. I'm scared I'll never be enough, he said, his voice raw. Vivian's smile was slight but certain. You already are. Just keep fighting. For Emma, for yourself. I'll be here, fighting with you. Emma's laughter filled the silence, a light that cut through Ethan's doubt. Outside, Atlanta's autumn sun cast long shadows. But inside, in the warmth of Vivian's kitchen, Ethan felt the stirrings of a partnership that could redefine what it meant to be whole. The soft glow of a table lamp spilled across Vivian Harris's living room, casting shadows on the modern art that lined her Buckhead mansion's walls. Ethan Carter sat on the plush couch, his eyes fixed on his 3-month-old daughter, Emma, who lay in Vivian's lap, her tiny hands clutching a book of nursery rhymes. Vivian's warm and animated voice brought Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to life, her cadence rising and falling with a practiced ease that hinted at years of reading to her son Michael before his loss. Emma giggled, her dark eyes sparkling as she mimicked Vivian's tone with a high-pitched babble, her enthusiasm filling the room with a joy Ethan hadn't felt since Claire's death. The sight stirred something deep within him, a mix of gratitude and longing that made his chest ache. Vivian paused, her finger tracing the book's colorful pages, and smiled at Ethan. "She's a natural performer," she said, her voice light, but tinged with a personal, intimate warmth. Emma reached for Vivian's silver necklace, her tiny fingers tugging playfully, and Vivian laughed, a sound so genuine it caught Ethan off guard. He'd seen her as a savior, a CEO with a life he couldn't touch. But in this quiet moment, she was simply a woman who loved his daughter. "Claire used to sing that to her," Ethan said, his voice soft, the memory of his wife sharp but no longer cutting. Emma would kick like crazy, like she was dancing. Vivian's eyes met his, understanding passing between them like a shared secret. The evening had unfolded naturally, with Vivian insisting on reading to Emma after dinner. Ethan had watched, captivated, as Emma responded to Vivian's voice, her giggles bridging the grief that had defined their lives. As Emma's eyelids grew heavy, Vivian closed the book and shifted her to the crook of her arm, rocking gently. "Ethan said you're good with her," the words carrying more weight than he intended. Vivian's smile faltered, her gaze dropping to Emma. "I used to read to Michael every night," she said. "He loved rhymes, especially ones about stars. I'd make up new verses when we ran out." Her voice held a quiet ache, and Ethan sensed the depth of her loss. A mother who'd built an empire, but couldn't save her son. "Tell me more about him," Ethan prompted, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. Vivian's fingers brushed Emma's hair, a gesture both tender and automatic. Michael was curious, always asking why things worked, why the moon glowed, why cars moved. He'd climb onto my desk at Pinnacle, scribbling on my reports like coloring books. She laughed softly, but her eyes glistened. "When he got sick, I thought I could outwork it, like I'd outworked every obstacle in tech. But some things you can't fix." She looked at Ethan, her vulnerability raw. Seeing Emma and hearing her laugh, it's like a piece of joy came back. Not to replace him, but to remind me that I can still feel it. Ethan's throat tightened, her honesty pulling at something he'd buried since Claire's death. "Emma's been my reason to keep going," he said. "But it's hard, knowing I'm not enough for her. You've given us so much, Vivian, and I don't know how to repay it." Vivian shook her head, her hand stilling on Emma's back. "You don't repay love, Ethan. You share it." Emma stirred, her tiny hand reaching for Vivian's finger, and the sight undid something in Ethan. A wall of pride and fear crumbling under his daughter's trust in this woman who'd changed their lives. Vivian carried Emma to the crib upstairs, Ethan following, the mansion's silence wrapping around them. As she lay Emma down, the stuffed lion from Michael's nursery tucked beside her, Ethan felt the air shift, charged with unspoken possibilities. They stood by the crib, Emma's soft breathing the only sound, and Vivian turned to him, her eyes searching. "Ethan, I'm falling for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And it scares me. I knew Claire and saw how much she loved you. What if I'm chasing something I can't have, something that's not mine?" Her words hung between them, raw and unguarded, a confession that mirrored Ethan's fears. He stepped closer, his heart pounding. "I'm scared too," he admitted, his voice low. "Not of you, but of this. Of feeling something real when I'm still grieving Claire. But when I see you with Emma and hear you laugh with her, it's like I'm remembering how to live." Their hands brushed, the contact electric, and Ethan took her hand, his fingers trembling. "You're not chasing ghosts, Vivian. Neither am I. This is us." Vivian's eyes glistened, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, and their kiss was tentative, tear-streaked, a promise to face the fear together. Emma's soft coo broke the moment, and they both laughed, the sound shaky but real. Vivian adjusted the blanket around Emma, her fingers lingering on the lion. "She's our light," she said, her voice steady now. Ethan nodded, his hand still in hers. "She is." Outside, Atlanta slept under a clear sky, the snow from their first night gone. Inside, in the quiet of a preserved nursery, Ethan and Vivian stood on the edge of something new, bound by a child's laughter and the courage to choose love over loss. Ethan Carter's first day at Pinnacle Tech felt like a step toward redemption. Thanks to Vivian Harris's recommendation, he'd landed a job in the mailroom, a humble start, but a chance to rebuild. By his second week, he'd mapped out inefficiencies in the delivery routes, proposing changes that saved the company $30,000 annually. His supervisor, impressed, had him present the plan to the logistics team, and Ethan stood at the whiteboard, marker in hand, explaining his system with a confidence he hadn't felt since Claire's death. Vivian watched in the back of the room, her nod of approval warming him more than the applause. At home, he scooped up his 3-month-old daughter, Emma, from her high chair, her giggles as she grabbed his nose, reminding him why he was fighting. Yet, as he returned to his cubicle that Tuesday morning, an unmarked envelope on his desk shattered his fragile sense of progress. Inside were 3 photographs, each one a knife to his gut. The first showed Ethan carrying Emma into Vivian's Buckhead mansion that first snowy night, captured from across the street with a telephoto lens. The second was Vivian feeding Emma in her kitchen, the intimate moment framed by the window's soft light. The third was Ethan and Vivian kissing on her porch the previous weekend. Emma was visible in Ethan's arms, her tiny hand clutching Vivian's sweater. A typed note accompanied the images, its words cold and precise. "Does Pinnacle Tech know their CEO is sleeping with a mailroom employee? The board might find this interesting. So might the press. Your choice." Ethan's hands shook, the paper crinkling as his mind raced. Someone had been watching them, turning their private moments into a weapon. He traced the photo's details, searching for clues. The angles suggested a professional, someone skilled at staying hidden. Ethan recalled Vivian's stories of corporate battles, rival executives and board members who resented her success. One name stood out: Edward Langley, a board member who'd challenged her leadership for years, his ambition fueled by professional jealousy and personal prejudice. Vivian had mentioned Langley's subtle digs and his whispers about her unconventional decisions. Ethan's stomach churned as he realized the likely source. Langley had hired a private investigator to dig up dirt, aiming to undermine Vivian's position at Pinnacle. The photos weren't just a personal attack, but a calculated move to destroy her career. Ethan tucked the envelope into his bag, his heart pounding as he clocked out and headed to Vivian's mansion. Emma was at the company daycare, a perk Vivian had arranged, and Ethan picked her up, her babbling about a toy giraffe easing his tension. At home, Vivian was in her office, her voice sharp as she handled a client call. Ethan waited, bouncing Emma, who tugged at his shirt with a grin mirrored Claire's. When Vivian emerged, her blazer swapped for a soft cardigan. She sensed his unease. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Ethan set Emma in her playpen, where she happily chewed on a rattle, and handed Vivian the envelope. "Someone's watching us," he said, his voice low. Vivian opened it with steady hands, but her jaw tightened as she studied the photos. "Langley," she said, her tone icy. "He's been gunning for me since I took the CEO chair. Hired a PI once before to question my expense reports. This is his style." She tossed the photos onto the counter, her fingers lingering on the image of her feeding Emma. "He thinks this will scare me out of my job." Ethan's fists clenched. "This could ruin you, Vivian. Your reputation, your career, because of me." Emma's giggle punctuated the silence, her tiny hands waving the rattle, oblivious to the storm brewing. Vivian's gaze softened as she looked at Emma, and then at Ethan. "He's underestimating us," she said, her voice firm. "This isn't about a scandal. It's about control." Ethan paced, his mind racing. "What do we do? If this gets to the board, the press, they'll tear you apart." Vivian stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm, grounding him. "We face it together. Langley wants me to run, to hide. I've fought worse than him. Lawsuits, takeovers, people who thought I didn't belong at the top. I'm not backing down now." Her eyes flicked to Emma, who babbled happily, and a smile tugged at her lips. "She's worth fighting for. So are you." Ethan felt his resolve waver, torn between fear and admiration. Vivian's strength was a force, but the photos exposed a vulnerability, their love, their makeshift family, laid bare for judgment. He knelt beside Emma's playpen, her laughter a lifeline. He said, "I don't want to cost you everything," his voice raw. Vivian joined him, her hand resting on Emma's head. "You're not costing me, Ethan. You're giving me something I thought I'd lost. A reason to fight, not just for Pinnacle, but for us." Emma grabbed Vivian's finger, her giggle filling the room, and Ethan felt the weight of their bond. This wasn't just about him or Vivian. It was about Emma, the child who'd brought them together. Atlanta's evening lights flickered outside, but inside, as Vivian and Ethan planned their next move, Emma's light held them steady, a reminder that love could face any threat if they stood together. The boardroom at Pinnacle Tech gleamed with polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows, starkly contrasting the storm brewing within. Vivian Harris sat at the head of the table, her charcoal suit crisp, her posture radiating authority honed through years of navigating corporate battles. Ethan Carter stood beside her, his mailroom uniform swapped for a borrowed blazer, his heart pounding as he faced the 12 board members who held Vivian's career in their hands. In his mind, he saw his 3-month-old daughter, Emma, giggling at the company daycare as she played with a stuffed lion, a reminder of what was at stake. The blackmail photos. Ethan entering Vivian's home, Vivian feeding Emma, their kiss on her porch, lay in a manila folder before Edward Langley, the board member who'd orchestrated this attack. Today, their love would crumble under scrutiny or stand as a testament to their strength. Langley, his silver hair slicked back, slid the folder across the table with a smug smile. "Before we discuss quarterly projections," he began, his voice dripping with old money confidence, "we must address these." He opened the folder, revealing the glossy 8x10 images to the board. Gasps rippled through the room as the photos circulated, each violating Ethan and Vivian's private moments. Langley continued sending these to us yesterday, along with allegations about our CEO's judgment, a relationship with a mailroom employee, a man living in her home with his child, is questionable at best, reckless at worst. Ethan's fists clenched under the table, but Vivian's hand found his, her touch steady, grounding him like Emma's trust. Vivian's voice cut through the tension, calm but sharp. What these photos show, Edward, is love. Last I checked, Pinnacle's handbook doesn't dictate my personal life. Her eyes swept the room, meeting each board member's gaze. Under my leadership, Pinnacle has grown 300% in revenue, expanded into 5 markets, and earned top industry awards. My judgment has built this company. What's yours built? She clicked a remote, and the presentation screen lit up with charts showcasing Pinnacle's success, rising profits, client satisfaction, and employee retention. Ethan watched, admiration mingling with fear. Vivian was a force, but Langley's attack was personal, designed to exploit their unconventional bond. Ethan's mind flashed to the photo's source. Vivian had confirmed Langley's involvement, tracing the private investigator to a firm he'd hired before to dig into her finances. Langley's resentment, fueled by her rise above his influence, had turned their love into a weapon. Ethan's contribution at Pinnacle, streamlining delivery routes, saving $30,000, felt small in this arena, but it had earned him a voice. He stood, his voice steady despite his nerves. I was homeless 3 months ago, ready to steal to feed my daughter. Vivian didn't just save us. She gave me a job, a chance to prove myself. I've worked hard, improved logistics, and earned my place. If loving her is a scandal, then judge me, not her. Board member Lisa Nguyen leaned forward, her expression skeptical but open. The optics are concerning, Vivian. A CEO and an employee. It raises questions. Vivian's smile was sharp. Optics or bias? I've faced worse than gossip, lawsuits, takeovers, and doubts about my competence. I've never backed down, and I won't now. She gestured to Ethan. He's saved Pinnacle money and boosted efficiency. His supervisor calls him exceptional. That's the judgment you should question. Ethan felt a surge of pride for Vivian's defense and his growth, rooted in the stability she'd given him and Emma. Nguyen's gaze shifted to Langley. Who sent these photos, Edward? Langley shifted, his confidence faltering. An anonymous source, he said, but his hesitation betrayed him. Board member James Carter, a grizzled veteran, pressed, Who, exactly? After a tense pause, Langley admitted, A private investigator I hired to protect Pinnacle's interests. The room erupted in murmurs. Nguyen's voice was ice. You spied on our CEO without board approval? That's corporate espionage. She pulled up Pinnacle's governance documents on her tablet, her fingers swift. This violates your fiduciary duty, Edward. Vivian seized the moment, her voice commanding. I've built Pinnacle through trust, not deceit. If my personal life is an issue, replace me. But you won't find a CEO who's delivered what I have. The board's whispers grew heated, tablets glowing as members reviewed bylaws. Carter spoke, his tone firm, motioned to censure Langley for breach of ethics. Nguyen seconded, and 10 hands rose, Langley's remaining down. His face reddened, his gambit backfiring spectacularly. This isn't over, he muttered, but Vivian's calm reply cut through. It is for you, Edward. The press will love a story about a board member spying on his CEO. As the meeting adjourned, Ethan felt Vivian's hand squeeze his, a silent victory. Emma's image lingered in his mind, her laughter at daycare, her trust in them both. They'd faced the storm and emerged stronger, but whispers of gossip lingered, a hint of battles to come. Outside, Atlanta's skyline gleamed, but inside, Ethan and Vivian stood united, their love a shield against judgment, fortified by a daughter who bound them together. The fallout from Edward Langley's failed blackmail attempt hit like a storm across Atlanta. A local blog, tipped off by an anonymous source, likely Langley's final jab, published the photos of Ethan Carter and Vivian Harris, igniting headlines that spread faster than the morning traffic. Pinnacle Tech CEO's scandalous romance with employee screamed one article. The grainy images of Ethan entering Vivian's mansion, Vivian feeding Emma, and their porch kiss plastered online. Comment sections buzzed with vitriol. Gold digger, cradle robber, unprofessional. Ethan sat at Vivian's kitchen island, his phone glowing with the latest post, his stomach churning as he bounced his 3-month-old daughter, Emma, on his knee. Her giggles, sparked by a colorful rattle, felt like the only anchor in a world suddenly too loud. Fresh from a Pinnacle board call, Vivian tossed her tablet onto the counter, her jaw tight. She said they're calling it a PR nightmare, her voice steady but edged with frustration. The board's backing me, but clients are asking questions. She glanced at Emma, who waved her rattle with a grin, and her expression softened. "You okay?" she asked Ethan, her hand brushing his shoulder. He shook his head, setting Emma in her high chair, where she babbled at a stuffed lion. "I overheard 2 guys in the mailroom today," he said, his voice low. "They called me a kept man and said I'm living off you. It's not just the blogs. It's everywhere." Emma's giggle punctuated his words, reminding them of what they were fighting for. Vivian pulled a chair beside him, her fingers grazing Emma's tiny hand. "Let them talk," she said, her tone fierce. "I've heard worse. Executives who said I didn't belong at Pinnacle. Clients who questioned my competence. Gossip doesn't define us." Ethan met her eyes, her strength a contrast to his doubt. "It's not just gossip, Vivian. It's our life. What if Emma grows up hearing this, thinking her dad's a leech?" Emma reached for Vivian's necklace, and her coos drew a smile from Vivian. "She won't," Vivian said. "She'll see a father who works hard, and a family that fights for each other." The scrutiny intensified at a Pinnacle networking event that evening. In a suit Vivian had helped him pick, Ethan felt out of place among the tailored executives and glittering chandeliers. Emma was at home with a sitter, and her absence caused a quiet ache. A client's wife, her wine glass in hand, approached Vivian with a smirk. "He's a bit young, isn't he?" she asked, nodding toward Ethan. Vivian's smile was razor sharp. She replied that love doesn't check IDs, earning a laugh from nearby guests. But the woman's raised eyebrow lingered. Ethan, overhearing, felt heat rise in his cheeks. Later, a colleague cornered him by the bar. The man said living in Buckhead must be nice, and his tone implies more than curiosity. Ethan forced a smile. "It's home," he said, but the words felt hollow. Back at the mansion, Ethan found Vivian in the living room, Emma asleep in her arms, the stuffed lion beside her. The blog post glowed on Vivian's tablet, comments piling up. "Ethan said they're saying you're using me to relive your past," his voice tight, "that I'm taking advantage of your money." Vivian set Emma in her playpen, where she stirred, clutching the lion. "They don't know us," she said, stepping closer. "I built Pinnacle through worse lawsuits, boardroom fights, and people who saw me as a token. This? It's noise." She paused, her eyes searching his. "But it hurts you." Ethan nodded, his gaze on Emma. "I want her to be proud of me, not see me as someone who needed saving." Vivian took his hand, her touch steady. "She will be. You're not just the guy I helped. You're the guy who's streamlining Pinnacle's logistics, saving thousands. You're the father who reads to her every night." Emma babbled softly, her tiny fingers waving, and Ethan's heart eased. Vivian's strength wasn't just in her words. It was in her belief in him, in them. "How do you do it?" he asked. "Face the judgment and keep going?" Vivian smiled, her fingers brushing Emma's hair. "I learned early at Pinnacle. People will judge you for anything. I fought for my place, For Michael's memory. Now I'm fighting for us. She squeezed his hand. We'll face this together. Let the blogs talk. We've got Emma, and we've got each other. Ethan looked at his daughter, her trust in them both a quiet force. The world outside could rage, but in the warmth of Vivian's home, their family was real, rooted in a love that no headline could undo. Ethan Carter stood at a whiteboard in Pinnacle Tech's logistics office, marker in hand, outlining a new tracking system he'd designed to streamline client deliveries. His mailroom job had evolved into a coordinator role after his cost-saving route optimizations caught the attention of Pinnacle's operations team. The system, built on software he'd taught himself during late nights while Emma slept, promised to cut delivery times by 10%. As he explained the interface to a room of analysts, his voice steady, he caught Vivian Harris's eye from the back. Her subtle but proud nod fueled a confidence Ethan hadn't felt since before Claire's death. His 3-month-old daughter, Emma, was at Pinnacle's daycare, her giggles echoing in his mind as he spoke, reminding him why he pushed forward. The promotion came with a raise, enough to cover diapers and formula, a small but tangible step toward independence. At Vivian's Buckhead mansion, Ethan handed her a check for household expenses, his first contribution. It's not much, he said, setting Emma in her high chair, where she banged a spoon with glee. Vivian tucked the check away in a sweater instead of her usual blazer with a smile. It's everything, she said, her voice warm. You're building something, Ethan, for you and Emma. Emma babbled, waving her spoon, her dark eyes bright as she reached for Vivian's hand. The sight, his daughter's trust in Vivian, eased the lingering doubt that he was living off her wealth. After dinner, Ethan sat on the living room floor, teaching Emma to stack colorful blocks. Her tiny hands wobbled, but she squealed when the tower stood, clapping as it toppled. Vivian joined them, her laughter blending with Emma's as she added a block, her fingers brushing Ethan's. She's got your determination, Vivian said, her eyes soft. Ethan grinned. And your flair for drama. The moment felt ordinary, yet profound. A family taking shape in the quiet spaces between ambition and love. But Ethan's mind drifted to Vivian's battles. The stories she'd shared over coffee, lawsuits from competitors, boardroom fights where her authority was questioned, the weight of proving herself in a world quick to judge. How do you keep going? He asked, stacking another block. After everything, Michael, the scrutiny, all of it? Vivian leaned back, gazing at Emma, who chewed a block with focus. I didn't. Not at first. After Michael's death, I buried myself in Pinnacle, thinking work could fill the hole. It didn't. I faced clients who saw me as a token, board members like Langley who wanted me gone. But I learned to fight for what matters. My team, my vision, my son's memory. She paused, her hand resting on Emma's head. Now, I'm fighting for this. For us. You and Emma make it worth it. Make. Ethan's chest tightened. Not with the ache of inadequacy, but with the realization that their partnership was mutual, built on shared strength. He thought of his growth, the hours spent learning coding basics on a borrowed laptop, the pride of presenting his tracking system to a team that now respected him. He admitted that I used to think I had to match you, watching Emma stack a block with surprising precision. Your house, your career. But I'm starting to see it's not about matching, it's about contributing. Vivian's smile was radiant. You are. Your system's saving Pinnacle thousands, and you're giving Emma a father who shows up. That's more than money. Emma giggled, knocking over the tower, and Ethan laughed, the sound mingling with Vivian's, a harmony that felt like home. Later, as they tucked Emma into her crib, the stuffed lion from Michael's nursery nestled beside her, Ethan felt the weight of their journey. Emma reached for Vivian's finger, her coos soft, and Vivian whispered, "Good night, little star." The nickname, a nod to the nursery rhymes they read together, cemented Emma's role as their light. Ethan took Vivian's hand, their fingers intertwining. He said, "I want to keep building this," his voice steady, "for Emma and us." Vivian squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening. "We will. Together." Outside, Atlanta's skyline sparkled, the city's hum a backdrop to their quiet resolve. The blog still whispered about their relationship, but the noise felt distant, drowned out by Emma's laughter and their shared purpose. Ethan's work at Pinnacle, his growing confidence, and Vivian's unwavering support were bricks in a foundation stronger than gossip. As they stood by the crib, Emma's soft breathing was a promise of tomorrow. Ethan knew their love wasn't just surviving. It was thriving, built on the courage to choose each other daily. The living room of Vivian Harris's Buckhead mansion was bathed in the soft glow of morning light, filtering through tall windows to illuminate Ethan Carter as he sat on the floor with his 9-month-old daughter Emma. She was no longer the fragile infant from their desperate night at the CVS. Now, she crawled with determination, her dark eyes sparkling as she clutched a crayon, scribbling on paper. Ethan guided her tiny hand, helping her draw a wobbly circle, his heart swelling at her giggle. Vivian stood at the kitchen island, reviewing legal documents, her presence a steady anchor in their evolving life. The papers were for Emma's adoption, a step that would make Vivian her legal mother, a milestone that felt both inevitable and profound. Yet, as Ethan watched Emma's crayon dance, a flicker of guilt surfaced. Claire's memory lingered, a quiet question of whether he was moving on too soon. Emma's pediatrician, Dr. Rachel Patel, arrived for a home visit, part of the adoption process. Her warm smile eased the tension as she knelt beside Emma, who babbled, "Da!" and offered her a crayon. "She's thriving," Rachel said, checking Emma's chart. Happy, healthy, and adored. Vivian joined them, her sweater swapping her usual CEO polish for a softer look. Emma, spotting her, crawled over with a squeal, shouting, "Mama V!" and tugging at Vivian's sleeve. The nickname, born from Emma's attempts at Vivian, hit Ethan like a wave. He watched Vivian scoop Emma up, her laughter blending with Emma's as they twirled, the crayon drawing forgotten. The sight was a testament to their bond, forged in quiet moments. Vivian singing lullabies, Emma napping on her shoulder, their shared joy a bridge across their losses. Rachel reviewed the adoption papers, her pen moving swiftly. "The court needs to see a stable home," she said. "You've got that in spades." Ethan nodded, but his thoughts drifted to Claire. She'd wanted Emma to have a family, love, security, everything Vivian offered. Yet the headlines still lingered, blog posts and whispers calling their relationship a scandal. At Pinnacle, Ethan's promotion to logistics coordinator had quieted some doubters, and his tracking system now saves $50,000 annually. But outside, the world judged. Colleagues sidelong glances, clients raised eyebrows. Ethan feared Emma would grow up hearing those whispers, questioning their family's legitimacy. Vivian set Emma down, who crawled back to her drawing, now a messy swirl of colors. "What's this, little star?" Vivian asked, kneeling beside her. Emma pointed proudly. "Family," she declared, her voice clear, despite her toddler's lisp. The drawing showed 3 stick figures, one with Ethan's spiky hair, one with Vivian's curls, and a smaller one with a green scribble, echoing Claire's blanket. Ethan's throat tightened, guilt warring with gratitude. "She sees us," he said, his voice low. Vivian met his eyes, understanding his unspoken fear. "She sees love," she said. "Claire gave Emma this." We're honoring her by building it. Ethan took Vivian's hand, the weight of her words settling. I want this. Us, Emma, the family. But I keep thinking about Claire, about what people say. What if Emma grows up ashamed of us? Vivian's gaze was steady, her fingers tightening around his. She won't. We'll teach her what family means. Choice, not judgment. I've faced worse at Pinnacle. Lawsuits and board members like Langley who wanted me out. I kept going because I knew my worth. We'll show Emma hers. Emma giggled, waving her drawing, and Ethan felt the guilt ease, replaced by a resolve to protect this life they were forging. Rachel gathered her things, smiling. The adoption should finalize next week. You're a family already. This makes it official. After she left, Ethan and Vivian sat with Emma, who crawled between them, her laughter filling the room. Vivian shared more of her past, how she'd rebuilt Pinnacle after Michael's death, turning grief into drive, yet always feeling incomplete. Emma's changed that, she said, her voice soft. You both have. Ethan nodded, his hand on Emma's back. You've changed us too. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm building something. The adoption papers on the counter were a promise. But the real bond was in Emma's trust. Her Mama V, a testament to their love. Outside, Atlanta's autumn breeze stirred the trees, carrying whispers of gossip that no longer held power. The blogs could talk, but Ethan and Vivian's family was honest and rooted in these moments. Crayon drawings, shared laughter, and a lion from a lost past watching over a new future. As Emma yawned, clutching her drawing, Ethan knew challenges remained. Society's judgment, his doubts. But their love, forged through choice, was stronger. They were a family, not just in law, but in heart, ready to face whatever came next together. The fluorescent lights of the CVS pharmacy hummed overhead, casting a familiar glow over the baby formula aisle, where Ethan Carter stood, holding his 18-month-old daughter, Emma. 2 years had passed since that desperate snowy night when he'd nearly stolen to feed her, and now the aisle felt sacred, a place where despair had given way to hope. Ethan, dressed in a suit bought with his earnings from Pinnacle Tech, adjusted Emma's green dress, its color a nod to Claire's blanket, now folded in her crib at home. Emma, her dark eyes bright, pointed at a shelf with a giggle, her tiny sneakers flashing with each step. "Milk!" she chirped, her voice a melody that anchored Ethan's heart. This was no ordinary day. They were here to marry Vivian Harris, the woman who'd saved them and become their family. Vivian appeared at the aisle's end, radiant in a sapphire dress that hugged her frame, her curls loose and catching the light. A diamond ring, bought with Ethan's savings from his logistics coordinator role, sparkled on her finger, symbolizing his commitment, not her wealth. Emma squealed, "Mama V!" and reached for her, her trust a testament to the bond they'd built. Vivian scooped her up, laughing as Emma tugged her necklace, a moment of joy that silenced the whispers of gossip that had followed them. The store manager, Rosa, who'd heard their story, had hung a congratulations banner between the shelves, transforming the aisle into a makeshift chapel. Dr. Rachel Patel, Emma's pediatrician and adoption advocate, stood nearby, smiling, while James Carter, a supportive Pinnacle board member, held a small ceremony book, ready to officiate. Rosa dimmed the store lights, creating a soft glow as patrons paused, curious but respectful. Ethan took Vivian's hand. Emma balanced on her hip and faced James. "This is unconventional," James said, his voice warm, "but I've never seen a couple quite like you." He opened his book. "Ethan, your vows." Ethan took a breath, his eyes locked on Vivian's. Emma's giggles a quiet backdrop. "Vivian, 2 years ago, I stood here with only 47 cents and a daughter I couldn't feed. You didn't just save us. You gave me hope, a home, a purpose. You saw me when I couldn't see myself, loved Emma like she was yours from the start." He paused, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "I choose you, not because I need you, but because you and Emma are my world. I promise to build our future together daily with love and courage." Vivian's eyes glistened, her hand squeezing his as Emma babbled, clutching the stuffed lion from Michael's nursery, now her favorite toy. "Your turn," James said gently. Vivian took Ethan's free hand and Emma's tiny one, her voice clear and strong. "Ethan, you and Emma gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. I built Pinnacle through battles and faced judgment for who I am, but nothing prepared me for the joy of loving you both. Claire gave you the gift of fatherhood, and I promise to honor that by loving Emma as my own, not as a replacement, but as a celebration of what we've found." She looked at Emma, who grinned, waving the lion. "I promise to love you, Ethan. Your strength, doubts, and your heart that keeps fighting. We're building something bigger than us, together." James closed his book, smiling. "I pronounce you husband and wife, by the power vested in me by the state of Georgia. Ethan, kiss your bride." Ethan leaned in, his lips meeting Vivian's in a soft, promise-filled kiss, Emma clapping with a delighted, "Yay!" That made Rosa chuckle from behind the counter. The small crowd, Rachel, James, a few curious shoppers, applauded, their warmth drowning out the memory of blog headlines and whispered judgments. Ethan's work at Pinnacle, now streamlining client deliveries across 6 markets, had earned him respect, silencing some critics. But the true victory was here, in this aisle, where their family had begun. Emma walked between them as they stepped outside, holding their hands, chattering about pretty lights and asking for ice cream. "Mrs. Harris Thompson," Ethan said, testing the name. Vivian laughed, squeezing his hand. "I'm keeping Harris for Pinnacle. Can't let the board think marriage softened me." Their laughter carried across the parking lot, where their practical SUV waited, a car seat ready for Emma. "Da, Mama V," Emma said, stopping with the gravity of a toddler's proclamation. "Family now?" Ethan knelt, his heart full. "Always, Princess." Vivian's eyes met his, her smile complete, a happiness built on facing life together. They drove away from the CVS, where desperation had sparked salvation. Atlanta's sun gleamed, the city alive with possibility. Ethan caught Vivian's eye in the rearview mirror, her expression mirroring his. Love, not fragile but forged, strong enough to weather any storm. In the back seat, Emma sang a daycare song about families, her voice a reminder that the most beautiful stories began in the unlikeliest places, built from courage, choice, and a little girl's light.